It might not have been their intended use case when they started the partnership, but Microsoft just gave us access to one of the best Android controllers out there right now for emulation and cloud gaming. How's it going, everyone? Taki here. Today we're going to take a look at the new and exciting Xbox branded X2 Pro controller from GameSir. So, as you can see, we have a brand new Gamepad Controller to test out from GameSir, and I'm actually very excited about this. When it comes to gamepads, we have all kinds of options on the market right now. One of my favorites is the Kishi 2 because it has very nice analog shoulder buttons, and that seems to be the biggest thing that a lot of these controllers are missing. So, as you can see, our design is largely the same as it was before, except that we have a new Xbox button here, and we have the redesigned D-pad that came with the X2. This also isn't the first time the company has done something like this, but inside the box we have a hardshell case with GameSir branding. Inside the case we have a GameSir sticker, a set of rubber nubs for the analog sticks, a 1-month subscription to Game Pass, and a manual and some warranty information. If you're completely new to this series, I do want to just go over the control layout that we have with this controller. So we have a Type-C plug on the right side, and this one can pivot, so it makes it a bit easier to get a phone in and out of this controller. We have our start and select buttons on the top of the controller, followed by our left analog. And this one has a good range of motion with no rough points, and the same can be said about the one on the right side. Above this, we have a set of fairly chunky input buttons, but these use dome switches and not conductive rubber. Our D-pad is a bit smaller compared to the ABXY buttons, so it would have been nice to see this a bit bigger. In the bottom corners, we have a screenshot button and an Xbox button here for game streaming. In the middle of the controller, you have a nice rubber pad that will protect the back of your phone from scratches. On the left and the right side, you have these rubber rails. Now, the bad part about these that I've already talked about before is that they essentially force you to need to remove whatever case you're using on your phone to be able to use this controller. There just isn't enough space for a proper connection if you keep your phone in a case. This can be kind of annoying depending on the kind of case that you're using with your phone. To play devil's advocate though, the Razer Kishi has this part here, which can also make it so you can't access the Type-C jack, and it also cannot move, so it's a bit harder to use. On the top of the controller, you can see that we have a set of stacked shoulder buttons with pretty chunky L1 and R1 buttons. I don't have any problem with these, but they can be a bit clicky since they are essentially using mouse switches for input. The star of the show on this controller is the redesigned R2 and L2 buttons that have full analog input. We'll talk more about them in just a moment. Now, the X2 Pro comes in 2 colors, and this black one is definitely my favorite, and that's largely because they've never done a color option like this. The white one is also good, but I already have ones that resemble that, and I wouldn't go out of my way to buy another controller with almost the same style. This one kind of stands out as a completely new product, and it has a pretty decent paint job that rejects fingerprints about as well as you could expect with a black paint finish. On the back of the device, we have the GameSir logo in the center, which at least leaves the front side almost entirely Xbox branded, which I like. On the left and the right sides, we have a set of grips. I've said before that I really like the grips on the X2 controller, and these are the same. The difference this time around is that they've managed to add these 2 additional input buttons. These are dome switch buttons like everything else, and they work well. We'll look at some Android situations to see how these are reported in different apps in just a moment. Before doing that, I want to give you a better idea of the analog travel length that we have with our new R2 and L2 buttons. It's not the biggest travel length that I've seen in a controller, and it's comparable to what you'd get on a Kishi, with the main difference being that the button itself is much bigger. I'll also point out that this controller should fit basically any phone on the market today, but you should always check the dimensions of your phone that you have to make sure that it will work before you buy it. When it comes to comfort of this in your hands, I think this is by far one of the better controllers out there today. I think the only thing that's really holding them back right now is the fact that they do have a rather boxy frame, and the front edge is not that curved. You get nice comfort when this is sitting in the back of your palm, but this part here could be a bit better, and it is better on other controllers like the Kishi. This comes with 2 analog cap styles to choose from. One is a convex style, and the other is concave. The difference between them is minor, and I think both are a welcome addition over using the stock analog, since that is just a bit too small for an analog of this size. I'm going to stick with the cap on the left side since it has the best grip. While we're here, I want to quickly go over some of the differences that I'm seeing between the X2 and the X2 Pro. The top device is the Type-C version of the X2, and the bottom is our new X2 Pro. Right off the bat, you'll see that the extension portion is located on the opposite side of this new controller. I'm also noticing that the new controller is slightly longer than the old one, and that's probably due to the new analog input buttons. As I've already pointed out, we kept the same grips, but we have those two back buttons now, and these kind of remind me of the buttons on Udon to some extent. When it comes to the paint, this is going to be a little harder to see on YouTube after the compression, but the new controller is definitely pure Xbox white, while the old one kind of has an off-white look to it. So I think this new one fits the style a lot better. Aside from that, everything on the front is pretty much the same, but you will notice that our ABXY buttons are a bit bigger. The old buttons come in at around 7mm, and our new ones come in at around 8.5mm. For comparison, an actual Xbox controller has buttons that are around 10mm in size. Let's keep moving on. When it comes to the analog sticks, you have pretty good, precise input. Now, if you talk about range of motion, you essentially have what seems to be a pretty even circle. I like when it's a box, but that only matters in some areas where the circle is too small, and this one doesn't seem like it's going to have any issues. I also went ahead and tested out the analog shoulder buttons, and these are also great. You can feather these pretty easily, and they have good range of motion. I'm also noticing that they have a rather strong pushback force to them than other controllers, and this is also nice. One thing that I'm noticing is that the two back buttons do not report any values to the system when they are pressed, which is not what I wanted to see. I made sure this was the case by going into another app, and I was not able to set either button to a mappable action. After consulting the manual, I did find out how these are supposed to work. Now, I originally assumed that the left and the right buttons would have a key value. So for example, the D-pad has a button label and a value. Our B button has the same thing, but it reports a key code of 97. As long as you have a key code for an input button, you can use that key inside apps and emulators. But unfortunately, that is not how it works with our back buttons. So let's go through the process of configuring these buttons. We have to start by holding the Start and Select button with the back button that we want to configure. After you do this, you will see that the two LED lights start to flash. After this, you press a button that you want to map to the back button. Once you do that, the back button will act as whatever key code that you've assigned to it. Now for me, this isn't really that useful because these buttons are all very good on this controller, so I wouldn't really need to remap an existing button. What I would want is an additional input source, and that's something that you can do on other controllers and on devices like Udon. The way it is now, you don't gain any extra input buttons, and that would have been very useful for screen mapping situations. I also want to mention that this controller can do pass-through power delivery. Now, some of the older models have problems doing this successfully on various phones. Essentially, what it would look like is your phone would not get any charge when you plug it in. On my end, I am at least going to test this out on two different phones to see what happens. You can see that this phone recognizes the charger and it starts to report that it is getting charged. Unfortunately, this isn't charging at fast speeds. This is a slow charging speed based on how much battery I currently have. You can see that I'm only charging at 1.4 amps, which might seem like a lot, but this will go up to almost 4 amps if I power the phone directly with this cable. On the other phone, it states that it is quick charging, but after investigating, it seems that it's not charging at all. So these are the two typical scenarios that you can find. Now, I use the X2 Type-C controller for a lot of the phone testing that I do because I have configuration profiles for every emulator set to this controller, and it's just easier to deal with than having to worry about Bluetooth connections. As someone that emulates a lot of systems, not having analog shoulder buttons is very annoying, and it's nice to see that they finally got around to adding them after so many people complained. Oddly enough, there are not a lot of options on the market right now if you have an Android device and you want a telescope controller with analog shoulder buttons. Having these buttons can be very useful depending on the game that you're playing. If you recall, the GameCube controller had analog shoulder buttons, and some games made use of them for mechanics. Super Mario Sunshine is one example of that, and I want to show off what you can do with this controller. As you can see here, I can spray water and run at the same time. Flood will sync up with how much pressure you apply. With digital buttons, you would only be able to go fully on or fully off. The problem is that you cannot run with full force applied, and there is a part of this game where you need to be able to lightly press the shoulder buttons to spray water on the floor while you run, and you can do that with the X2 Pro. Now, I do want to talk about one thing with this, and it's the GameSir World app. I personally don't ever use this app, and I'm going to explain why. I think if you want a screen mapping solution on Android, there are better options out there right now that don't do what this one does. And I don't know why GameSir refuses to get this fixed because other companies don't have this problem, but they also don't have controllers with this many features. So we go and download the latest version here on GitHub. Even if you get this from Google Play, you will be directed to sideload this app to gain the functionality that you need. It's going to warn us that this file might be harmful, but I'm going to download it anyway. I'll just show you that this says that it's blocked by Play Protect because this app bypasses security conditions. Some of this is due to how screen mapping works in the background, but this is the only app that will give you this kind of warning. Let's keep moving with the installation. As you can see in this application, it knows that some games have native controller input and that others need screen mapping. To showcase the screen mapping, we will use Genshin Impact to see how the app functions. When I try to start the game, it says that I have not activated the application. To do this, I will need to do several things, and these are things you need to do with many screen mapping applications. You usually have to allow the app to float over other apps, and you need to use user debugging so the application can send touch inputs to the game that you're playing. Now, some companies require you to use a PC to activate part of this, and others use dongles, but this one can also transfer the necessary things with wireless debugging, and that is what I will use. Now let's look at the screen mapping. You'll see that there's a floating icon in the corner, and you'll need to press on that to start mapping your buttons. In some cases, you can download a profile that is already there, or you can make your own. I usually make my own, so I will show off what that looks like by mapping my analog stick and an input button. If that's too much work, you can try out one of the provided cloud profiles. As you can see, I can fully use the controller to play this game. The only issue is the one that I already described, and it is why I typically only use GameSir controllers for emulation, even if they do provide access to screen mapping tech. Now, something that I have never talked about on this channel is Xbox Cloud Gaming on Android, and that is largely because it doesn't have servers where I live, and playing that is not enjoyable using other means that I have to access outside servers. I thought there was no way around this, but it turns out that there is. I asked another person that I know who uses this app, and they told me to get a NetEase network app that works with Xbox servers, and I was extremely shocked that it works this well. The quality isn't going to be anything to write home about, but it was much better than what it was like before I was about to give up. I was connecting to a VPN in the US and then setting the app itself to the US, but the games looked like I was playing them on a wireless dial-up connection with Oregon Trail graphics. This is insanely good performance in comparison, and I'm having a blast testing this out because I've never used this app before. So, when it comes to the advertised purpose of this controller, I would say it works very well, especially if you live in a country where Microsoft has cloud gaming servers. When it comes to the competition, I think the Kishi 2 is the only controller that gives a comparable experience to the new X2 Pro. It's made by a bigger company, and it is widely available. Just like the X2 Pro, it also has analog shoulder buttons and 2 analog joysticks. The difference in terms of mechanics is going to come down to the analog inputs. The analog sticks on the Kishi are essentially Switch Joy-Cons, which I know some people don't like for PC gaming, and the X2 Pro comes with ones that are more akin to those of an Xbox or a PlayStation controller. Neither of these controllers are that cheap, but the X2 Pro is the more affordable option. I bought my Kishi 2 for around $110 locally, but they retail for $99 on Amazon in the US. The GameSir X2 Pro is available right now on Amazon for $80 with a 1-month Game Pass Ultimate subscription. That thing is essentially worth $1 right now, so this is a $79 controller, and I think that it is competitively priced for what you get. You can also get it on GameSir's own website for the same price, but there is an 8% off code if you use the code down below, which would bring the total to around $74. If you want this controller and you live in an area where it is on sale on Amazon, I would just pay the few extra dollars to get it on there. It's a good controller, and so far, there are not a lot of comparable options on the market. Happy gaming, everyone. Taki out.